Lynz, what are you listening to?
Brian, you share yours and I'll share mine.
With millions of podcasts, how do you choose?
We are here to help you find that next bingeable podcast.
Or that piece of content you'll follow regularly.
You're listening to Feed Drops.
Dancing. If I can find the right fader, we can talk.
All right.
Lynz, I'm excited about today's episode because I'm going to live vicariously through your stories of Podcast Movement 2022 in Dallas, Texas. I first want to ask you, before you get to say anything, were the crickets really that bad?
Yeah, they were out and about. I saw them it felt like they were flying around at nighttime if you were walking by. And they were, I saw some smokers outside who got dive bombed.
Now, were they crickets or were they like grasshoppers or were they like locusts? Was this a biblical plague?
There were a lot of them, but they were crickets, I think. And occasionally you'd see like one or two hopping around inside, but like generally they didn't make it that far. It's just like you sort of saw like a lot of stepped on crickets.
They wanted the AC too.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
I joked on someone's TikTok that everyone's catching the podcasting bug these days.
Boom, boom.
Boom.
Awesome. So welcome to another episode of Feed Drops, everybody. My name is Brian. I run Sitch Radio in Irvine, California, and I am joined by Lynz Florin, who runs Growth Network Podcasts in Los Angeles. And the two of us met at a podcast conference, and years later, we hung out at another podcast conference, and Lynz had this awesome idea of Feed Drops, two studios coming together, podcasters submitting their shows via our website, feeddrops.com, and us choosing a show that resonated with us and playing clips and talking about it. And today you will get none of that.
No, we're getting exactly. We're off the normal plan a little bit because we know that podcasters are the people we are talking about and talking to. We felt like sharing what we learned is a great way, not only for me to share. As long as I'm sharing this information with you, Brian, let's record it and share it with everybody.
Amen. And truly, this is the first time I'm hearing of it. Lynz and I haven't been in the same room since he's returned. And we're going to do this one remotely. And hopefully next week we'll be back in studio bringing you two cool episodes. Now, let's first start off with what's the difference between Podcast Movement and Podcast Evolutions?
Podcast Movement, I think, is the larger event, and It has more tracks. When I looked at the schedule, at the end of the day, there were like 9 different stages, and most of them had something going from the morning till the afternoon. And, but beyond that, they're very similar events, they're about the exact same length of time. It's kind of the same slot of parties. The iHeart party is the big night 2 party. And, I think it was just a bit bigger.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I don't think it was double the size, but it was bigger.
Very, very cool. I've yet to go to a Podcast Movement. I've only been to Evolutions, and I've been to an Outlier podcast festival, and looking forward to Outlier coming back. It's rumored that they will be in Los Angeles in January. And addition to that, I think it's early next year as well when Evolutions is in Vegas.
March, I believe. In Vegas, yeah.
Very cool.
I also learned that PodFest, which is typically in May and in Florida, they're always in Florida. All these other ones move around, but PodFest is in Orlando. They are moving from, instead of May, which I feel like is a hard time of year to get people's attention, to January. And so anyone who's looking at some warm weather time, the very last weekend of January, PodFest, that would be another one. I'm cautiously optimistic that I'm going to go to it this year.
But it's still in Florida.
Still in Florida, and that is a ding. I talked to the people at the PodFest booth. They had their own booth at Podcast Movement. I love that these places have like sort of a friendly connection. Like they aren't competitors with each. They are, but they aren't.
Right.
And so Podfest, the people there sort of, the vibe at the booth made me want to go to Florida, which is a really high hurdle. It takes a lot. I've never been to Florida, and nothing's made me want to go before.
I've been once, and you're going to have to, we're going to do another episode after Podfest, and Lynz can tell us to include me all about it. The humidity in the South, man. And
but
January won't be too bad, but January is also hurricane season. So you could be dealing with, craziness there as well.
It's true. We'll have to see how that one pans out.
Yeah. So as a man in your position within the podcasting spectrum, how do you choose which tracks you're going to attend, which sessions in a track you're going to attend?
Well, for one, I splurged on the Pro Pass this year, and I decided that having access to a lounge that was separate from everything else was worth it alone. And I found that they had hot breakfast, so I could roll in and get, just bacon and eggs and like potatoes, but like, all right, eggs and potatoes work great for me. But also it was the quietest room in the whole place. And so just to be able to go there, and if you did talk to somebody, they also had a Pro Pass, so they were also their business forward, So everyone I talked to was interesting. And the conversations that I eavesdropped on were also very interesting in that room. So when it comes to picking the things I want to go to, I kind of have a couple of different goals. There's like my personal interests, the things that some stuff just lights me up the minute I hear about it. Then there's the stuff that what's going to have information I can relate back to my clients. Because if I can provide value for them, then they're not going to go to the competition at a new season or something, that keeps them in the fold, makes them feel like I'm a good partner. And then there's sort of a who I could meet and collaborate with kind of, and so those are, in probably that order, my personal interest is the heavy driver. It'll get me to go even if I'm tired, whereas going just for the business is like hard to suffer through. So, choosing things like Dallas Taylor's 20,000 Hertz. He did what goes into an episode of that show, and that's like I think the best sounding podcast ever made. I am really amazed by what they do and what they talk about. It's interesting, and they use sonic stuff like crazy throughout it, and they did a whole thing on the HBO sound, and those kinds of things. And it's like they study the sort of the cultural bit as well as the sonic, how it's made kind of bit. They spend 250 to 300 hours of labor per episode, and they are making money on the show. So if you do the math on how many hours of technical labor, story editing, reviews, VO, sound, new sounds, this kind of stuff per episode, and if they're putting that out on a weekly basis, and then those episodes are making enough money to cover overhead, and on top of that, then so it's a sustainable model if you understand, if you can really take it to market, and he's done a great job at differentiating his show, and I think getting a lot of sound people into it, and he's sort of best in class.
We need to make a note to include a link to his show in the show notes, because I have not heard of this show. So,
well, I don't know if they'll sign off on participating in a Feed Drops thing, but I'd love to do an episode. He did one about his name, Dallas Taylor, and it's a unique name, but it's not so unique that there aren't other Dallas Taylors.
Yeah.
And so he interviewed 6 other Dallas Taylors. He interviewed a name psychologist who studies sort of how your name affects who you become in life. Because there's sort of like, if you're named John, you have a very different experience than if your name is Lynz. Like, not a lot of other Lynzes. there's like a commentary on my gender. There's like just different things about having a certain name, how it can affect your personality. So he talked to somebody about that, and then he interviewed people, and it was like 5 men and 1 woman who was named Alice Taylor, and she was by marriage, like she was Dallas something else, and then got Taylor anyway. And it's like he weaved this whole story about him and what it says about him and what it says about other people, and he made it very deep, and it was like,
Interesting.
Dude, that's fascinating, and that you figured out how to go down these rabbit holes, and the money follows you.
Yeah.
He does have other business, and he started this show to fill his staff people's time when in between contracts, but now it's like, anyway.
No, it's crushing.
So that was a personal interest one that I can definitely take as a business owner and learn from.
Right.
But getting to see, he went through every step of his decision making, how he goes from this point to this point, and then what their screenshots look like here, here, and here. And for somebody who is a workflow planner, it really gave me a model to learn from.
That's pretty cool. So now you made several TikToks while you were there. And if you're not following Feed Drops on TikToks, head on over, because they are educational, very entertaining. And in my opinion, Lynz, very well done. You do a great job at putting together a TikTok video. And I've watched you run around the studio, and in 5 minutes, you've got like 82 TikToks made. I don't know how that works, but you're magic. But you made a TikTok, and it was a lady on stage discussing the fact that people are pitching podcasts at this event and walking away with $100,000 deal for a 10-episode season. Talk to me.
That's definitely the highest performing TikTok we did. From that time, the pitches was PRX and Radiotopia.
Okay.
And they were, they talked about how all of the big companies have pages now on their websites where they sort of dictate the terms of how you can pitch to them. And that there's really, they went through sort of, you can in about 4 or 5 slides tell the story of your podcast and why someone should fund it. And there are people whose job it is, they're searching for new content, right? Their companies have money and they want to acquire content that has legs. And so you do have to sort of make the case that you've got partners or you've got funding from other sources too. You kind of like, hey, we've done this, we've done A through M, we need help with N through Z, kind of approach. And if you lay out what you want, they want you to get it and they want you to deliver that product. And so you do have to kind of do some storytelling. Their big thing is like, if you're making a story, like create sample audio at whatever level you can, because it'll help someone inhabit it, help someone think about it a bit more.
Right. Right.
And so I turned, the guy next to me, we've been buddies a bit at the Blast 2 conferences, and we're like, why don't we have pitch decks with us? Like it really was like, we have projects that are developed in a sense that the right person would find it interesting, and it's like, okay, then why haven't I turned that into a pitch deck? And the submission forms are out there, there's no reason not to be submitting. Unless you don't have the goods, like you do have to have a compelling thing for somebody to fund and explain how you want $150,000 or whatever you'd like it to be. But they're not scared of those numbers as long as they're justified.
Right. So of all the parties at Podcast Movement Dallas 2022, what was your favorite?
My favorite was the Uncut party, which was kind of a little hidden gem of a party.
Nice.
It was small. It was on the first night. But it was, everybody there was interesting, and open to stuff that's outside of the mainstream, right? NFTs are not, being able to use NFTs with your podcast is kind of a little in the fringe. And
Right.
so anyone who's interested in that is probably doing something cool. Met
Yeah.
some awesome people who, a couple of whom I might get to talk about their podcasts on a future show.
Well, for those of you who don't know what Uncut is, Uncut.fm is a platform that helps podcasters and non-podcasters create their NFT projects. They help offset cost of minting depending on what level you buy in at. Beautiful page, beautiful store. They make it easy for the non-crypto blockchain mentality to purchase an NFT with just a credit card. When you create your free account, they assign you a non-custodial wallet. It's been a great platform, and that is where we have our NFT project in development. So you can head on over. There are NFTs available to purchase, and it's not just a piece of art. You're not supporting just a show. You gain access into our Discord community, and you're going to be surrounded by like-minded people of podcasters and people who love podcasts. And collaborating is phenomenal. And if you're shy, you're behind the scenes, you don't like video, it's a Discord server, so it's chat based. We can talk, via audio, which is cool, but get out from behind your comfort zone and start collaborating, talking to people and discussing ideas. But in addition to that, 50% of the revenue generated via the feed drops show NFTs is going back to charity. Lynz, why don't you talk about Get Lit a little bit?
Yeah. So, we both bring a show every week to talk about on feed drops. We each brought a charity. I brought Get Lit, which is a youth poetry organization. I was on their voluntary young professionals board for a couple of years a while back, and they just do amazing work helping teens, junior high and high school kids with engaging with history and literature and their own lives through poetry. And they definitely provide them some of a framework to kind of find their own courage and find their own power in their life, which any teenager struggles with. But growing up in Los Angeles, in the heart of it all, it might be difficult, to find your own self. And they do a good job of helping people find themselves. And that has made me really impressed with some of the youth that run through that program. What about you, Brian?
That is awesome. Well, the charity I chose is Second Chance Studios. They're headquartered in New York, and it takes individuals who are released from jail and or prison, pays them while they're in a cohort learning how to produce content such as this. And the really cool thing, I just got my acceptance letter Monday that I have volunteered to be a mentor, and they've accepted me.
Nice.
So I get to, I'm excited about it. Next week, I get to meet my mentee, and I volunteered to teach a couple longer form classes for them as well. Where I'm going to find that time, I don't know. Luckily, they're 3 hours ahead, so I can, burn some early morning candles and get the job done. But I was a secretary for a nonprofit out here in the veteran space, and it got to a point with the studio that I just couldn't serve them to the caliber they needed to be served. Mm-hmm. So I stepped down, and I've been looking for a charity to get involved with. And this one speaks to me because, I don't think no matter what your opinion of our justice system is, we know there's issues, we know there's flaws, and helping anybody find gainful employment, become a productive member of society, and not get back in that system is phenomenal for me to be just a small part of. So that is Second Chance Studios. Always taking donations like every nonprofit, but give them a look. If you visit sitchradio.com, I'm actually flying a flag on my homepage for them as well now. So that's the charity I chose. So what we are going to do is 50% of the money that comes in based off episodic NFTs that we build is going to be put, actually, the blockchain automatically disperses those funds into a third wallet, and the members with voting rights of the NFT community are going to get to vote 2080 to which charity they prefer funds be dispersed to. And they can vary that. At the minimum, one charity is going to get at least 20%, which is, we want both to walk away with something. So we kind of capped it at that, but it's up to the voters. And if you own 3 or 4 NFTs with voting power, you get 3 or 4 votes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, the goal, we're trying to create a situation where you feel like you have some agency in how we're doing things instead of just buying into a system that you don't understand. And so,
so it's more than that piece of art, which is
yeah.
cool.
And so, but it is a way to show support, and these NFTs, whether or not they have value in the long term, it's just sort of a way to participate. And if you like what we're doing and want to support, and let's say you want to dip your toe in NFTs while showing support, this would be a great way to do that. Any one of them, dip your toe, have fun.
Yeah. Back to podcast movement, buddy. What was your favorite session?
I think the one that blew my mind was the Podcasting 2.0 with Adam Curry and Dave Jones. And I know I feel like you're a little more in that world, like you've been paying a bit more attention than I have. But what the part they started with was how they came to create the podcast index. And basically originally they partnered with Adam Curry was partnered with Apple Podcasts to get the first podcast directories out, and he was like instrumental in helping it. But then as he gave feedback and they didn't take it, and they started seeing that occasionally someone would get deplatformed without any due process, he realized that that was a strange bedfellow. They have too much control over the industry with any action they do, it affects thousands of people. And so they created a whole system of organizations and companies with other podcasters to create a decentralized infrastructure. The podcast index, the podcast taxonomy, which has like the different jobs that everyone does. And basically all these things exist and interoperate in such a way that they create a new back-end system for this, and they're all in this blockchain that is the RSS, podcasting 2.0, RSS 2.0, something like that. And I know I'm probably getting some of it wrong, but they went through thing by thing that you can include in your RSS feed that allows you to share information with the apps that receive that information, because not all apps are calibrated to get every tag that has been created in the space yet. But you can start listing staff people in your RSS feed with bios and photos. You can start guests, and so every episode, it's like in the blockchain what these information is. So it is findable, retrievable in a really robust way. And, I'm not even sure where to go to find out more about it, because it's just like, it's pretty heady stuff. And, but you can tag things to go live. And anyway,
I was going to say, actually, right now, I think if you Google value for value, and it's the number 4, not spelled out, it's going to redirect you to podcastindex.org. And you can see what shows are listed. And this is the crazy thing. There are only, Lynz, if you had to guess how many podcasts of the 4 million now, I guess, in existence are participating in this value for value program, take a guess.
Oh God, like a 20,000 at most. I mean,
9,138 as of right this second. That's
Yeah.
it. And the crazy thing is, all you have to do is claim your podcast. And when you do that, I don't want to turn this into a commercial for Fountain, but I use the Fountain app. And number one, when you create the account, you get a non-custodial wallet. Number two, you find your podcast, you claim it, they send you an email, you verify it's yours. Now you're in the running. And people using not just Fountain, but any podcast player on the value for value system, and there's many, can send you a boostagram, which is a message attached to a monetary value of Satoshis, which is the measurement of Bitcoin. They can set up to where every minute that I listen to this show, I want to send them 200 Satoshis. And every minute that you consume the show, this micropayment happens behind the scenes automatically. And that's just a way for the listener to thank the creator for creating what they want. It's literally that easy to get involved, and people don't. So podcastindex.org, everything you need to know, want to know, is there to get set up. And I mean, this show is there, and we've earned almost 700 Satoshis so far for just claiming our show on Fountain. And it's not a lot of money. Lynz and I aren't vacationing in the Bahamas.
No. That's like 29 cents or something, but it represents what could be turned into a regular stream. And what's crazy is you can set up the split inside of your RSS feed. So when people tip you or boost you, it splits 50% to hosts, for example, or you could give the guest 10%, or you can create splits inside your RSS feed that tell the value for value, how to split the things. It doesn't go through any middlemen, right? There is no, look, I'm not sure the tax implications of all this might be complicated long-term, but nobody is taking their 3%, right? Like there's not anything like that. So it's that's sort of the decentralized thing. I mean, it goes straight to you through this conduit that has been built to not require another entity to participate.
Yeah, and I believe Podcast Index takes 1 Satoshi per transaction. That's it. And that's just to help them maintain everything they're doing. Now, unfortunately, the majority of the podcast players out there aren't playing well yet. And not just players, but hosting companies. And the hosting companies will be the last to probably get in line. However, Buzzsprout right now is actually providing more service for RSS 2.0 than any other host out there. Now, that's commercially. The people who are maximizing on the benefit are serving their own episodes and writing their own RSS. Blueberry, for example, is upgrading their WordPress plugin so you can take advantage of more and more of these tags in RSS 2.0 as well. So it's early, it's confusing, it's painful at points, but with Fountain making the changes they made, it became so much easier. So
well, the hosting wars continue. I think this is one of the pieces of podcast movement. The industry, it's still a big bang. I feel like it is still growing, and it is still, if you've been to trade shows for established industries and then you go to podcast movement, you can tell where there's stuff kind of missing. You're like, where's the people that do this at this thing? Where's the people, there's just like, there's some roles that are yet to be filled in the industry that it's like a more mature industry has every nook and cranny of the space. With companies, you're like, oh, you do that esoteric little thing? And so I could tell that there's space to do that in here. There's still room to grow using this. This technology is going to be a part of it, I think. The apps, the apps keep developing. The hosts, there's now hosts that are like, oh, we can also help you submit. If you're multimodal, you're more than just podcasts. Let's say you have music you want to put, or audiobooks you want to put onto Spotify or Amazon, or, then we can do these kinds of, and you're like, okay, like they're drawing, hosting is sort of the center thing, but then they do a whole bunch of other stuff in all different directions.
Most definitely. So we're getting close to the end of time. What is one or two takeaways that you could share with the audience that you gained from attending the last podcast movement?
I think the biggest one that was on everybody's lips was the video is here to stay. Video is one of the major ways people find things. And I talked to several people who run companies with the word audio in their name, or they're audio-centric people, and they have been hiring people to build out their video. And so it's not that video has to be first, but you have to plan for how video will be used, or else you're really missing a part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
To some people it's a sad evolution, and to other people it's exciting. And I think it's exciting, and it allows us, I'm really interested in how we promote the show. I do it on TikTok and stuff like that, like how you can use video to pull people into wanting to, when they're not using their eyeballs, to then decide to listen.
So did you, if not meet, see somebody that was like, oh my gosh, that's so-and-so? And any fanboy going on?
I did not.
You weren't that excited to see the Podfather himself, Adam Curry?
I'm not. I know people are. I don't know his legend properly. I think I know of him, and I think I geeked out on hearing about Dallas Taylor's. It wasn't his personality, but his show. That kind of thing was like, oh, you're going in deep on how this works. Like, to me, the process is what I sort of fanboyed out on. Cool. But I would say the people I met were so fun. Podcast people are great people. Everyone is generous and interested in each other. And even if they're in the self-promotional kick, eventually they'll stop talking long enough to ask you what you do. And everyone is so nice. I got to meet the people at the different booths, like Podchaser, Podbean, and like.
Wait a minute. You were running around with Podchaser making TikToks.
Yeah, we got to do, we did some Billy on the street, like running up to people with a camera in their face and talking to them stuff. I did that with Faya from Podchaser. And so that was a lot of fun, and it made the conference a lot of fun, because you get a lot of attention when you do something like that. And then you're also doing it with a buddy. I made friends from my virtual TikTok connections turned into real people. That's great.
Cool, man. That is so cool. Well, Lynz, I kicked off the show. We're going to let you bring it home.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning into this special episode. We talked about podcast movement and so much more in the podcast industry. Tell us in the comments below if you want more of us talking about the industry, or whether you want us to get back to highlighting podcasts. Go back to what you started, buddies. We can do, we obviously like talking about this stuff, but we'd love your feedback. It would certainly help us create a better show. And so thank you, Brian, for virtually hosting this shindig here. And we're going to say adieu. Adieu, adieu.
Adios, everybody. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and TikTok. Those are our favorite platforms of choice as of late. And we will see you next week.